Observation concerns the production of requirements through conducting an assessment of the participant's work environment. This technique is appropriate when documenting detail about current processes or if the project is intended to improve or change an existing process. This method relies on studying people's performance on their jobs and is sometimes called job shadowing or following people around or monitoring. For instance, some people have their work routine down to such a habit that they have difficulty explaining what they do or why. The observer may need to watch them perform their work in order to understand the flow of work. In some projects, it's important to understand the existing processes to better access the process modifications that may be needed. There are two basic approaches for this observation technique. Either passive or invisible. Here the observer notes the user working through the business routine but restricts themselves from asking any questions. The observer records what is observed but otherwise stays out of the way. The observer waits until the entire process has been completed before asking any questions. The observer should observe the business processes several times to ensure that they understand how the process actually works today and why it works that way. Active or visible would be the opposite. In this approach, while the observer observes the current processes and takes note of, they're free to go ahead and perform a dialogue with the user. When the observer has questions as to why something is done in a particular way, they ask questions right away, regardless of whether it breaks the routine or not. That's part of the agreement. Here are some of the variations of the observation technique. In some cases, the observer might participate in the actual work to get the hands-on feel for how the business processes work on that particular day. Of necessity, this would be limited to activity that is appropriate for a non-expert to perform and whose results would not negatively impact the business. The observer becomes a temporary apprentice or a learner. The observer watches a demonstration of how a specific process and/or task is performed. Here are some of the elements to consider when planning this technique. Determine what sampling of users should look like. For example, experts and novices, just experts, and observe in which activities. Prepare questions to ask during or after the shadowing. Now on to the processes. Observer introduce him or herself to the person being observed and assures the user that the work is not being questioned and make sure they understand that the work and the resulting documentation will serve as an input for requirements analysis. Here are some ground rules to spell out. Inform the user that the observer is present only to study the processes and will refrain from discussing future solutions to any problems. Explain to the user that they may stop the observation process at any time if they believe that it is interfering with their work. Suggest to the user that they may think aloud, eavesdropping on someone's thinking, while they are working as a way to share their intentions, challenges, and concerns. Right after finishing the observation, make sure you have properly compiled your notes and that they're complete. After all, most likely you will not get a second chance. Well, that's observation in a nutshell, so thank you very much for watching.